During my chemotherapy, I tried calling my family, but no one answered. They were always too busy. When I got the news that my husband had left me for his mistress, I didn't cry. Instead, I made a call to my childhood sweetheart. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The cold plastic chair in the oncology wing had become my second home over the past 4 months. Every Tuesday and Friday, I sat in that same spot by the window, watching the IV drip poison into my veins in the hope it would kill the cancer faster than it killed me. At 62, I never imagined I'd be spending what might be my final month staring at beige hospital walls while my own family treated me like I'd already died. My phone sat silent in my lap. I'd stopped trying to call after the 3rd week of treatment, but today felt different. Today, the loneliness was crushing my chest harder than the tumor ever had. The chemo fog made everything feel distant and surreal, but the ache of abandonment cut through it with crystal clarity. I dialed Sarah's number first, my eldest daughter, the successful lawyer who used to call me every Sunday without fail. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Sarah Martinez. I'm probably in court or with a client. Leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. The cheerful professional tone felt like a slap. I hung up without speaking. Next, I tried Michael, my youngest. At 35, he was busy with his own family, twin boys who were 7 now. I understood that, I really did, but understanding didn't make the silence hurt less. Hey, Mom, he answered on the 4th ring, but his voice was distracted. I could hear cartoons playing in the background, the boys arguing over something. Hi, sweetheart. I'm at the hospital for my treatment today and I just wanted to hear your voice. Oh, right. How's it going? There was no real concern in his voice, just polite obligation. Listen, Mom, the boys are having a meltdown about lunch and Jessica's at work. Can I call you back later? Later never came. It never did anymore. I stared at my contact list, my finger hovering over my sister Linda's name. She lived just 20 minutes away, but you'd think it was 20,000 miles based on how often I saw her. When I first told the family about my diagnosis 6 months ago, she'd hugged me tight and promised she'd be there for whatever I needed. That promise lasted about as long as it took for the reality of cancer to set in. The phone rang once before she picked up. Myrtle? Is everything okay? I'm at chemo, I said simply. I was hoping maybe you could stop by after your shift. I could really use some company. A pause. Oh, honey, I wish I could, but Tom's got that work dinner tonight and I promised I'd make his grandmother's pot roast. You know how he gets about his family recipes. Tom's work dinner, his grandmother's pot roast. Everything was more important than sitting with your sister while she fought for her life. Maybe this weekend? She added, but we both knew she wouldn't call. The IV bag was nearly empty, which meant I'd been sitting here for almost 3 hours. 3 hours of silence from everyone who was supposed to love me. The nurse, a kind woman named Patricia who always remembered how I liked my coffee, came over to check my vitals. No visitors again today? She asked gently, adjusting the IV line. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. Patricia had been doing this job for 15 years. She'd seen it all. Families who slept in uncomfortable chairs for weeks, spouses who learned to manage feeding tubes, children who rearranged their entire lives around treatment schedules. She'd also seen the patients like me, the ones who fought alone. Some people don't know how to handle illness, she said softly. It scares them, so they pull away instead of leaning in. I nodded, but Patricia's kindness only made the abandonment sting worse. A stranger was showing me more compassion than my own children. The worst part wasn't even their absence during treatments. It was how they acted when I did see them, like my cancer was an inconvenience they had to tolerate. Last month, at Michael's birthday party for the twins, I'd felt so weak I had to sit down every few minutes. Jessica, his wife, kept making comments about how I should pace myself and maybe consider resting at home next time. Sarah hadn't even shown up, claiming she had briefs to review, but it was Levi's behavior that cut the deepest. My husband of 35 years had become a stranger since my diagnosis. The man who once brought me coffee in bed every Sunday morning now barely looked at me across the dinner table. He'd moved into the guest bedroom, claiming my night sweats and restless sleep were keeping him up. When I asked him to come to my oncologist appointment last week, he said he had a golf game he couldn't cancel. Golf. While his wife learned whether the tumors were shrinking or spreading. I pulled out my phone again and scrolled to his number. Maybe if I called him directly, explained how scared I was, how much I needed him here with me. Levi Automotive, he answered in his professional voice. It's me, I said. I'm at treatment, and I was wondering if you could maybe swing by when you're done with work. We could grab dinner somewhere quiet or just go home and watch a movie together. Silence stretched between us. I could hear the sounds of his garage in the background. Pneumatic tools, country music playing on the radio, men laughing about something. Myrtle, I've got 3 cars backed up and Jimmy called in sick again. I'm going to be here until at least 8, maybe 9. We'll talk when I get home, okay? He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the blank screen. We'll talk when I get home. But he never talked when he got home. He'd eat whatever leftovers I'd managed to prepare despite the nausea, watch television with the volume too loud, then disappear into the guest bedroom. In the morning, he'd leave before I woke up, avoiding the uncomfortable reality of watching his wife slowly fade away. The IV finished dripping, and Patricia came back to remove the needle. All done for today, she said with forced cheerfulness. How are you feeling? Tired, I admitted. It was the safest answer. Tired covered everything. The physical exhaustion, the emotional depletion, the bone-deep weariness of fighting a battle with no cheerleaders. That's normal. Make sure you eat something when you get home, even if it's just crackers. Your body needs fuel to heal. I nodded and gathered my purse, moving slowly toward the exit. Other patients were arriving for afternoon treatments, some with spouses holding their hands, others with adult children carrying magazines and homemade snacks. I watched a woman about my age settle into the chair I'd just vacated while her husband fussed over her blanket and asked the nurse 3 times about side effects. The parking lot felt enormous as I walked to my car. Every step required conscious effort, like I was moving through thick mud. The October air was crisp, and I could smell wood smoke from someone's fireplace. It should have been comforting, but it just reminded me of how many autumns I might have left. As I fumbled with my car keys, my phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. Sorry, I missed your call. Crazy day at the office. How did treatment go? I stared at the message for a long time. How did treatment go? Like every other treatment. Alone, scared, wondering if anyone would miss me when I was gone. But I couldn't type that. Instead, I wrote back, Fine, talk soon. The drive home took 20 minutes, but I made it in segments, pulling over twice when waves of nausea hit. The house was empty when I arrived, which wasn't surprising. Levi wouldn't be home for hours, and even when he was, the silence would be deafening. I heated up some leftover soup and managed 3 spoonfuls before my stomach rebelled. The kitchen felt too big, too quiet. Every surface held reminders of the life I'd built with Levi, photos of family vacations, the hand towels Sarah had given me last Christmas, a coffee mug Michael made in high school pottery class. Now that life felt like it belonged to someone else, some other version of Myrtle who had been healthy and needed and loved, I was clearing away the barely touched soup when something inside me finally cracked. Maybe it was the accumulation of all those unanswered calls, all those empty chairs beside hospital beds, all those nights sleeping alone while my husband avoided me like I was contagious. Maybe it was simply that a person can only take so much abandonment before something has to break. Whatever it was, I found myself thinking about Mitchell for the first time in months. Mitchell, who used to walk me home from school when we were 15. Mitchell, who wrote me terrible poems that made me laugh until my sides hurt. Mitchell, who promised he'd love me forever the night before I chose Levi instead. I hadn't spoken to him in over 2 years. Not since we ran into each other at the grocery store and had that awkward conversation about the weather. But something desperate and foolish made me wonder if he ever thought about me anymore. If he ever remembered the girl who used to steal his homework just to get his attention. Before I could talk myself out of it, Before I could remember all the reasons why calling your first love while going through chemotherapy was probably a terrible idea, I was scrolling through my old address book looking for his number, and there it was, written in faded blue ink, Mitchell Davidson. My finger hovered over the numbers, my heart pounding harder than it had in months. What would I even say? How do you call someone after decades of silence and explain that you're dying alone? But as I sat in that empty kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of a family that no longer had room for me, I realized I had nothing left to lose. I never made that call to Mitchell. By the time Thursday morning came around, the moment had passed and my courage had faded with the daylight. Instead, I told myself to focus on my next treatment, to be grateful for what I had rather than mourning what I'd lost. That positive thinking lasted exactly until I walked into the hospital parking garage and saw my husband kissing another woman. They were standing between two cars, completely absorbed in each other. Levi's hands were tangled in her dark hair, and she was pressed against him like she was trying to meld into his body. For a moment, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This had to be a mistake, some stranger who looked like my husband. But then he pulled back slightly, and I saw his face clearly. The same face that had been avoiding eye contact with me for months. The woman was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of effortless beauty that comes from good genetics and no worry lines. She was wearing scrubs, which meant she worked here. At the hospital where I came twice a week to fight for my life, my husband was having an affair with someone who probably saw sick people as part of her daily routine. I stood frozen behind a concrete pillar, my chemo bag hanging from my shoulder, watching my marriage dissolve in real time. They were talking now, their voices too low for me to hear, but their body language spoke volumes. She touched his chest possessively. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the kind of tenderness he used to show me. Then she checked her watch and said something that made him laugh. Actually laugh, the way he used to laugh at my jokes before cancer made me too tired to be funny anymore. She headed toward the hospital entrance while Levi walked in the opposite direction, probably back to his truck that was parked somewhere I couldn't see. I waited until they were both gone before moving again. My legs felt unsteady, but whether that was from the chemo or the shock, I couldn't tell. I made it to the elevator on autopilot, pushed the button for the oncology floor, and tried to pretend my world hadn't just imploded. Patricia was at the nurse's station when I arrived, and she must have seen something in my face because her professional smile immediately shifted to concern. "Mrs. Williams, are you feeling all right? You look pale." I almost laughed at that. Pale was my new normal, thanks to the chemicals that were supposed to save my life. But this was a different kind of pale, the kind that comes from seeing your husband betray you in the most vulnerable moment of your life. "I'm fine," I managed, "just tired." She didn't look convinced, but she led me to my usual chair anyway. As she was setting up my IV, I found myself studying her face, wondering if she knew. Did the oncology staff gossip about patients' personal lives? Did they know that Bed 7's husband was sleeping with someone who worked 3 floors down? "Patricia," I said suddenly, "do you know a nurse here with dark hair, about 5'4", maybe late 20s? She paused in her preparation. "That describes about half our staff." "Why do you ask?" "No reason. Just thought I recognized someone in the parking garage." I could tell she didn't believe me, but nurses are trained in discretion. She finished connecting my IV and left me alone with my thoughts and the steady drip of medicine that suddenly felt pointless. If Levi was already planning his exit strategy, what was I fighting for? The chance to survive cancer only to live alone in a house full of memories? The opportunity to grow old with children who couldn't be bothered to return my phone calls? I closed my eyes and tried to remember why this battle had felt important 6 months ago. The treatment took 4 hours, same as always. But this time, instead of the usual mixture of hope and determination, I felt nothing but empty resignation. When Patricia came to disconnect me, I barely acknowledged her cheerful commentary about my blood work looking good. I should have gone straight home, should have confronted Levi, demanded answers, done something to address the elephant that was now trampling through my life. Instead, I found myself driving aimlessly through town, past the high school where Levi and I met in typing class, past the church where we got married, past the first apartment we shared when we were young and stupid, and thought love was enough to overcome anything. Eventually, I ended up at Miller's Diner, the 24-hour place where teenagers went after prom, and insomniacs went for pie at 3 in the morning. I ordered coffee I didn't want, and sat in a booth by the window, watching normal people live their normal lives. That's when I saw her again. The dark-haired woman from the parking garage walked in wearing civilian clothes now, jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She slid into a booth 3 tables away and immediately pulled out her phone, typing with the satisfied smile of someone who had delicious secrets to share. I watched her order a salad and iced tea, watched her check her reflection in her phone's camera, watched her answer a call that made her face light up with joy. When she said, "I love you too," loud enough for half the diner to hear, I knew exactly who was on the other end of that call. My husband. Telling another woman he loved her while his wife sat 30 feet away, bald from chemotherapy and invisible to everyone who was supposed to care about her. I left $20 on the table for a $5 coffee and walked out before I could do something I'd regret. The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and stop signs that all seemed to take forever. By the time I pulled into our driveway, Levi's truck was already there, which meant he'd left work early, probably spent the afternoon with his girlfriend, and was now home to play the dutiful husband. He was in the living room when I walked in, watching a baseball game with a beer in his hand. The picture of domestic normalcy, except for the lipstick I could still see faintly on his collar if I looked close enough. "How was treatment?" he asked without looking away from the television. "Fine," I said, testing the word. It tasted like ash in my mouth. "Good. I picked up Chinese food for dinner. It's in the kitchen." Chinese food. From the place we used to go on our anniversary every year until cancer made me too nauseous to enjoy General Tso's chicken. He'd remembered I could usually keep down plain rice and steamed vegetables, which should have felt thoughtful. Instead, it felt like guilt management. I stood there for a moment, waiting to see if he'd notice my expression, if he'd ask why I looked like someone had died. But his attention remained fixed on the game, on anything that wasn't his sick wife standing in the doorway of their shared life. "I think I'll just go to bed," I said. "Okay, I'll probably stay up and watch the late game. Try not to wait up." He hadn't waited up for me in months. The guest bedroom had become his permanent residence, and I'd become a stranger in my own house. But now I understood why. Hard to sleep next to someone you're betraying, especially when that someone is fighting for their life. In our bedroom, my bedroom, I supposed. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. The man I'd built my life around, the one I'd chosen over every other possibility, was already planning his exit. While I was getting poison pumped into my veins, he was kissing someone who represented everything I could never be again. Young, healthy, uncomplicated. I thought about all those nights I'd lain awake wondering if I was imagining his distance, if the chemo was making me paranoid. All those times I'd made excuses for his absence, convinced myself he was just processing the diagnosis in his own way. All those conversations with well-meaning friends who assured me that men handled illness differently, that he'd come around once the treatment was over. Now I knew the truth. He wasn't processing anything. He was planning his escape from the inconvenience of a sick wife. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dad says you seem tired today. Are you taking care of yourself?" Dad says. So Levi was concerned enough to mention my condition to our daughter, but not concerned enough to actually stick around and see how I was doing. I stared at the message until the words blurred together, then turned off the phone without responding. The house settled into its evening quiet, punctuated by the sound of Levi's laughter at something on television. Once upon a time, that sound had meant home to me. Now it just reminded me that he could still find joy in his life while mine crumbled around us both. I was still sitting there, fully dressed and staring at nothing, when I heard his footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside our bedroom door, and for one desperate moment I thought he might knock. Might come in and ask what was wrong, give me an opening to confront him about what I'd seen. Instead, the footsteps continued to the guest bedroom, and I heard his door close with a soft click. That tiny sound, the The sound of him choosing distance over difficulty finally broke something inside me. I reached for my purse, pulled out my old address book, and found Mitchell's number again. This time, I didn't hesitate. This time, I had nothing left to lose, and nowhere else to turn. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Hello? Mitchell?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "It's Myrtle. I know it's been a long time, but I really need to talk to someone, and I didn't know who else to call." There was a pause, then a warmth in his voice that I'd forgotten existed. "Myrtle, of course. I'm here. What's wrong?" And for the first time in months, I didn't feel completely alone. "Myrtle, of course. I'm here. What's wrong?" The kindness in Mitchell's voice nearly undid me completely. I gripped the phone tighter, sitting on the edge of my bed in the dark, trying to find words for everything that was falling apart. "I have cancer," I said finally, because there was no gentle way to ease into it. "Stage 3 breast cancer. I've been doing chemotherapy for 4 months, and today I found out my husband is having an affair with someone at the hospital where I get treated." Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence I'd grown used to with my family. It was the silence of someone absorbing difficult information, preparing to respond with care instead of platitudes. "Jesus, Myrtle. I'm so sorry. How are you holding up?" "I'm not," I admitted. "I'm really not holding up at all." "Where is Levi now?" "In the guest bedroom, probably texting his girlfriend. He moved out of our room when I started treatment. Said my night sweats were keeping him awake." The bitterness in my voice surprised me. I'd been swallowing that resentment for months, but saying it out loud to Mitchell made it sound as pathetic as it actually was. "Son of a bitch," Mitchell said quietly, and I found myself almost smiling despite everything. Mitchell had never been one to mince words, even back in high school. "How long has this been going on?" "The affair? I don't know. I only saw them together today. But he's been pulling away since my diagnosis, so maybe months. Maybe since the beginning." I took a shaky breath. My kids don't call anymore either. Everyone's too busy, too uncomfortable, too something. I sit through chemotherapy alone while other people's families bring them homemade cookies and magazines. "That's not right, Myrtle. That's not how family is supposed to work." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Apparently, I had the wrong idea about a lot of things. "Tell me about the treatment. What's the prognosis?" It was such a relief to have someone ask direct questions instead of dancing around the subject. "The tumors are responding to chemo, but slowly. My oncologist says if we can shrink them enough, surgery might be an option. But there's a complication." I paused, not sure how to explain the latest devastating news. "I need a bone marrow transplant. Soon. The chemotherapy has damaged my bone marrow more than expected, and my blood counts are getting dangerously low." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I need a donor. Family members are usually the best matches, so I asked everyone to get tested." My voice caught. "Sarah said she's too busy with a big case. Michael said he'd think about it, but that was 3 weeks ago. Linda said she's afraid of needles, and maybe someone else could do it instead." The silence on Mitchell's end was different now, heavier. "They won't even get tested?" His voice was tight with controlled anger. "Levi got tested, but he's not a match. Which is probably for the best anyway, considering he's planning his exit strategy." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. "The doctors put me on a donor registry, but the waiting list is long and my blood type is uncommon. They said it could take months to find a match, and I don't have months. What happens if you don't find a donor?" I closed my eyes. "Then the cancer wins." Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was steady and determined. "Where do I go to get tested?" "What?" I wasn't sure I'd heard him correctly. "To get tested as a donor. Where do I go?" "Mitchell, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Give me the information." Something warm unfurled in my chest for the first time in months. "It's a simple blood test. Any hospital can do it. They check tissue compatibility and a bunch of other factors. But the chances of you being a match are slim. Even siblings are only about a 25% match rate." "I'll take those odds. What's your doctor's name? I'll call first thing Monday morning." I gave him Dr. Brennan's information, spelling everything twice because my hands were shaking. Mitchell, this is a big deal. The donation process is complicated and uncomfortable, and there are risks. Myrtle, his voice was gentle but firm. You called me because you needed help. Let me help. Why? I whispered. Why would you do this for me? We haven't even talked in years. Another pause. Do you remember senior year when I got mono and missed 6 weeks of school? I frowned, not sure where he was going with this. Yes, you were so sick you couldn't even come to prom. Do you remember what you did? The memory came flooding back. I'd stopped by his house every day after school, bringing him homework assignments and updates on everything he was missing. When he was too weak to eat, I'd made him soup. When he was bored and restless, I'd sit by his bed and read to him from our English assignments. That was different, I said. We were dating then. No, Myrtle. That was you being the kind of person who shows up when people need you, the kind of person who doesn't abandon someone when things get difficult. His voice grew softer. I've thought about you a lot over the years. Wondered how you were, hoped you were happy. Finding out that the people who should be taking care of you are letting you down. Well, that doesn't surprise me as much as it should. What do you mean? I mean, I always knew you deserved better than Levi Williams. Even back in high school, he was selfish. I just hoped he'd grown out of it. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. I chose him, Mitchell. I chose him over you, and now look where it got me. Hey, none of this is your fault. Not the cancer, not his affair, not your family's selfishness. Sometimes life just deals you a shitty hand. We talked for another hour. Mitchell told me about his life, how he'd become a teacher, married a woman named Ellen who died 5 years ago from a heart attack, never had children. He'd been living alone in the same small town where we'd grown up, about 3 hours away from where I was now. I retired early, he said. Ellen's life insurance was substantial, and I'd saved enough to be comfortable. I spend most of my time reading, working in my garden, volunteering at the animal shelter. It's a quiet life, but it's peaceful. It sounds nice, I said, and meant it. There was something appealing about a quiet, peaceful life after months of chaos and fear. What about you? Besides the obvious, how have you been spending your time? I almost laughed. Sitting in chemotherapy chairs mostly, sleeping off the side effects, trying to keep food down, being ignored by my family. I paused. I used to garden too. Had a whole vegetable patch behind the house, but I haven't had the energy this year. What did you grow? Tomatoes, mostly. Green beans, cucumbers, herbs. I made the best marinara sauce from scratch. I found myself smiling at the memory. Levi used to say it was better than his mother's, which was high praise because that woman guarded her recipe like a state secret. I bet it was amazing. You always did have a gift for making something beautiful out of simple ingredients. The compliment caught me off guard. I couldn't remember the last time someone had said something genuinely nice about me. Mitchell, about Monday. You really don't have to get tested. I don't want you to feel obligated because of some conversation we had 40 years ago. Myrtle, listen to me. I'm going to that hospital Monday morning and I'm going to get tested. If I'm a match, I'm going to donate bone marrow. Not because I feel obligated, but because it's the right thing to do. And because... He trailed off. Because what? Because I never stopped caring about you. I know that probably sounds crazy after all this time, but it's true. Ellen knew it too. She used to tease me about my first love because your name came up whenever I'd had too much wine at dinner. My breath caught. Mitchell, I'm not saying this to complicate your life or put pressure on you. I'm saying it so you understand that helping you isn't a burden or a favor. It's something I want to do. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness for a long time, processing everything that had changed in a single phone call. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt something that wasn't despair or fear. I felt hope. The next morning, Levi left for work without saying goodbye, same as always. But instead of lying in bed feeling sorry for myself, I got up and made coffee. Real coffee, not the weak tea I'd been forcing down for weeks. I even managed to eat half a piece of toast without feeling nauseous. I was sitting at the kitchen table, actually reading the newspaper instead of just staring at it, when my phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Mom. Dad said you seemed really upset yesterday. Are you okay?" Dad said. There it was again. Levi positioning himself as the concerned husband while avoiding any actual contact with his dying wife. "I'm fine," I said, but my voice lacked the usual defeated tone it had carried for months. "Are you sure? You sound different." "I am different, Sarah. I've decided to stop waiting for other people to care about my life and start taking care of myself instead." "What does that mean?" I looked out the kitchen window at my neglected garden, already planning what I'd plant next spring if I was lucky enough to see it. "It means I'm going to fight this cancer with or without help from my family. And I'm going to be just fine either way." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Mom, if this is about the bone marrow testing, I really am swamped at work right now. But maybe in a few weeks—" "Don't worry about it," I interrupted. "I found a donor." "Really? From the registry?" "No, from someone who actually gives a damn whether I live or die." I hung up before she could respond. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of something, even if it was just the conversation. The weekend passed slowly, but instead of dreading Monday's treatment, I found myself looking forward to it, not because I enjoyed being poisoned twice a week, but because I'd have something to tell Dr. Brennan. I'd have a possible solution instead of just another problem. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, but I got dressed with more care than I'd taken in weeks. I even put on lipstick, which felt like an act of rebellion against the cancer that had been stealing pieces of me for months. At the hospital, Patricia noticed the change immediately. "You look better today, Mrs. Williams. More energetic." "I feel better. I think I might have found a bone marrow donor." Her face lit up. "That's wonderful news." "Family member?" "No, an old friend." I settled into my usual chair, but today it felt less like a prison sentence and more like a temporary inconvenience. "He's getting tested today, actually." "Well, fingers crossed. Dr. Brennan will be thrilled to hear you've got a potential donor lined up." As the IV started its slow drip, I found myself thinking about Mitchell driving to his local hospital, answering questions about his medical history, rolling up his sleeve for blood work. The image filled me with a warmth that had nothing to do with the heated blanket Patricia had draped over my shoulders. For the first time since my diagnosis, I wasn't fighting alone. Dr. Brennan called me at home on a Wednesday afternoon while I was attempting to water my neglected houseplants. His voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard since my diagnosis. "Myrtle, I have extraordinary news. Your friend Mitchell is not just a match. He's a 10 out of 10 match. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen compatibility numbers this perfect outside of identical twins." I sank into my kitchen chair, the watering can forgotten in my hand. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means his bone marrow is essentially identical to yours in every way that matters. The risk of rejection is almost non-existent, and the chances of successful engraftment are as close to guaranteed as we can get in medicine." He paused, and I could hear papers rustling. "Frankly, Mrs. Williams, it's miraculous. Your friend must have gotten tested immediately after you spoke." "He did, Monday morning." "Well, his timing couldn't be better. Your latest blood work shows we need to move quickly. I'd like to schedule the transplant for next Friday if Mr. Davidson is available." Next Friday. In 10 days, I could be on the road to recovery instead of circling the drain. I'll call him right away. There's something else, Myrtle. I've been treating cancer patients for 3 decades, and I've learned that family support makes a tremendous difference in outcomes. The fact that you have someone willing to undergo this procedure for you, someone who's not even a blood relative, that tells me you're a fighter with people who believe in your recovery, that's going to serve you well. After hanging up with Dr. Brennan, I immediately dialed Mitchell's number. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting by the phone. "I got the call too," he said before I could speak. 10 out of 10. The doctor said it was like winning the lottery. "Mitchell, I don't know how to thank you. This is everything. This is my life. You don't need to thank me, Myrtle. I'm honored to be able to help." His voice grew gentle. "How are you feeling about the timeline? Next Friday seems fast." "Fast is good. My blood counts are getting worse every day. Dr. Brennan says if we wait much longer, I might not be strong enough for the procedure. I took a deep breath. But Mitchell, I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't like donating blood. They'll put you under general anesthesia and extract bone marrow from your hip bones with large needles. You'll be in significant pain for days afterward, and there are risks with any surgery. I know. I've spent the last 3 days researching everything. I've talked to my doctor, read medical journals, even found online support groups for donors. He paused. Myrtle, I'm not going into this blindly. I understand the risks, and I'm choosing to take them. But why? Really, why would you do this for me? The question had been haunting me since our first conversation. Yes, we'd dated in high school, but that was 40 years ago. We'd both married other people, lived completely separate lives. His willingness to undergo surgery for me felt surreal. Do you remember the last conversation we had before you started dating Levi seriously? He asked. I frowned, trying to recall. Senior year had been a blur of college applications and family drama. Not specifically. It was at Jenny Morrison's graduation party. You'd had a fight with your father earlier that day. Something about him not wanting to pay for your college tuition. You were sitting on the back porch crying, and I found you there. The memory came flooding back. My father had screamed at me that evening, calling college a waste of money for girls who would just get married and have babies anyway. I'd been devastated, convinced my dreams of becoming a teacher were impossible. You told me I was worth investing in, I said quietly. You said I was the smartest, most capable person you knew, and that if my father couldn't see that, it was his loss, not mine. And then I told you something else. Do you remember? I closed my eyes, reaching back across the decades. You said that someday you'd prove to me that I deserved to be cherished. Exactly. And then 2 weeks later, you started dating Levi, and I figured I'd missed my chance. His voice grew softer. But Myrtle, that promise didn't have an expiration date. You deserved to be cherished then, and you deserve to be cherished now. The fact that the people in your life can't see that doesn't change who you are. I was crying now, big silent tears that slipped down my cheeks and dripped onto my shirt. Mitchell, I never married Ellen because I thought she was you. I married her because she was kind and good, and she loved me completely. But she knew about you. She knew that a part of my heart would always belong to my first love. He paused. Ellen died holding my hand, and do you know what her last words to me were? I couldn't speak. She said, "If Myrtle ever needs you, promise me you'll be there for her." She made me promise, Myrtle. On her deathbed, my wife made me promise to take care of you if you ever needed it. The tears were coming harder now. She sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was, and she would have liked you. You're both the kind of people who show up when it matters. He cleared his throat. So that's why I'm doing this, because 40 years ago I promised to prove you deserve to be cherished. Because 5 years ago, I promised my dying wife I'd be there for you. And because right now, today, I can't think of anything more important than keeping those promises. We made plans for him to drive up Thursday night so he'd be ready for Friday's procedure. I offered to book him a hotel room, but he declined. I'd rather stay with you if that's okay. I want to be close by in case you need anything, and honestly, I think we both could use the company. I glanced around my empty house, imagining it filled with conversation and laughter again. I'd like that. What about Levi? Will it be awkward having me there? I thought about my husband, who'd been coming home later and later each night, who barely acknowledged my existence when our paths crossed. Levi won't even notice. He's been avoiding me since the diagnosis. Having you there might actually remind him that some people still think I'm worth their time. Good. I'll drive up after lunch Thursday. Is there anything specific you'd like me to bring? Books, food, terrible movies to distract us while we recover? The casual assumption that we'd recover together, that he'd be there through the difficult healing process, made my chest tighten with gratitude. Just bring yourself. That's more than enough. Thursday afternoon arrived with unusually warm October weather. I'd spent the morning cleaning house with more energy than I'd had in months, actually vacuuming and dusting instead of just shuffling from room to room. I'd even managed to make a pot of vegetable soup without feeling nauseous from the cooking smells. At 3:30, I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched Mitchell climb out of an older Honda Civic, stretch his back, and look around at the house where I'd lived for the past 20 years. He looked older than I'd imagined. Silver hair, lines around his eyes, a slight stoop to his shoulders. But when he smiled and waved at me through the window, he looked exactly like the boy who used to walk me home from school. I opened the front door before he could knock. We stood there for a moment, taking each other in. 40 years had changed us both. I was pale and thin from treatment, wearing a colorful scarf to cover my bald head. He was heavier than he'd been in high school, with the soft edges that come from a desk job and middle age. But his eyes were the same. Kind, intelligent, completely focused on me as if I were the most important thing in his world. "Hi," I said, suddenly shy. "Hi yourself." He stepped forward and wrapped me in a gentle hug, careful not to squeeze too tight. "How are you holding up?" "Better now that you're here." He pulled back and studied my face with concern. "You're too thin. Have you been eating?" "Some. The nausea makes it difficult, but I managed soup today." "Good. I brought groceries. All the things I remember you liking, plus some stuff that's supposed to be easy on the stomach during treatment." He gestured toward his car. "Help me carry things in?" For the next hour, we moved his belongings into the guest room and unpacked enough food to feed a small army. Mitchell had remembered my weakness for chocolate chip cookies and brought a dozen homemade ones. He'd also brought fresh ginger for tea, bland crackers, applesauce, and all the ingredients for chicken soup. "You didn't have to do all this," I said as we organized the refrigerator. "Yes, I did. Taking care of people is what I do best. Ellen used to say I was half nurse, half teacher, all mother hen." He grinned. She meant it as a compliment. "It is a compliment." I watched him arrange medicine bottles on the counter with the same care he'd probably used organizing classroom supplies. "Mitchell, what are you most nervous about tomorrow?" "Honestly, I'm not nervous about the surgery. I'm nervous about you being scared." He turned to face me. "Are you scared?" I considered lying, giving him the brave answer that everyone wanted to hear. But Mitchell's eyes held the same patient kindness they'd had when we were teenagers, and I found myself telling the truth. Terrified. What if something goes wrong? What if your bone marrow doesn't take? What if I don't wake up from the anesthesia? I wrapped my arms around myself. What if this is all for nothing, and I die anyway, and you went through surgery for no reason? Hey. He stepped closer, placing gentle hands on my shoulders. "Look at me. Nothing is for nothing. Even if the worst happens, which it won't, I'll know I did everything I could to help someone I care about. That's not nothing. That's everything." "But what if—" "Myrtle," his voice was firm but loving. "Do you remember what you used to tell me when I'd spiral into worst-case scenarios?" I managed a small smile. "Take it one day at a time. One day at a time. Tomorrow we go to the hospital. I donate bone marrow, you receive it, and we both take the first step toward your recovery. That's all we have to worry about right now." That evening, we sat on my back porch, sharing Chinese takeout and watching the sun set behind my overgrown garden. Mitchell told me stories about his students, his volunteer work at the animal shelter, the novel he'd been trying to write for the past 10 years. I found myself laughing for the first time in months. "What's the novel about?" I asked. "A man who gets a second chance to make things right with the woman he should have fought harder to keep." He glanced at me sideways. "Ellen always said it was too obviously autobiographical to be any good. Maybe that's what makes it worth reading." We were quiet for a while, comfortable in each other's presence in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Then Mitchell asked the question I'd been dreading. "Where's Levi tonight?" "I don't know. He said he'd be working late, but his shop closes at 6. I set down my chopsticks, appetite fading. "He's probably with her, the woman from the hospital." "Have you confronted him?" "What's the point? He's already checked out of this marriage. Finding out I know about the affair won't change anything except make the next few months more uncomfortable." I sighed. I keep telling myself I'll deal with it after the transplant when I'm stronger. But honestly, I think I'm just avoiding another fight I don't have the energy to win. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. You know you deserve better, right? You've always deserved better than someone who abandons you when things get difficult. I made my choice 40 years ago. This is the consequence. No, Myrtle. His behavior is not a consequence of your choice. His behavior is a consequence of his character, and that's not your fault. Before I could respond, we heard Levi's truck pull into the driveway. Mitchell and I looked at each other, and I saw my own tension reflected in his eyes. Should I go inside? He asked quietly. No. He's going to have to deal with the fact that I have people who care about me, whether he likes it or not. Levi came through the back door a few minutes later, stopping short when he saw Mitchell sitting at our patio table. I didn't know we had company, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Levi, this is Mitchell Davidson. We went to school together. Mitchell, my husband Levi. The two men nodded at each other with the wariness of dogs circling the same territory. Levi's gaze lingered on Mitchell's overnight bag visible through the kitchen window. Staying long? Levi asked. Just tonight, Mitchell replied evenly. I'm donating bone marrow for Myrtle tomorrow. Something flickered across Levi's face. Surprise, maybe, or shame. He looked at me for the first time in days. I thought the family wasn't compatible. They weren't tested, I said quietly. Mitchell volunteered. Levi processed this information, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite swallow. Well, that's good of you. It's the least I can do, Mitchell said, and though his tone remained polite, there was steel underneath it. Myrtle's lucky to have people who want to see her get well. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Levi's face darkened, but he didn't take the bait. I'll let you two catch up, he said instead. I'm going to grab a shower and head to bed. Early morning tomorrow. He disappeared into the house, leaving Mitchell and me alone with the weight of everything unsaid. I'm sorry, I murmured. This is awkward. Don't apologize for his bad behavior. Mitchell reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You ready to get some rest? Big day tomorrow. As we cleaned up the dinner dishes, I found myself looking forward to the next morning for the first time since my diagnosis. Not because I was excited about surgery, but because I wouldn't be facing it alone. For the first time in months, I had someone in my corner who was fighting as hard as I was for my life to continue. The alarm went off at 5:30 Friday morning, but I was already awake. I'd been lying there for an hour, listening to Mitchell's soft snoring from the guest room and the familiar sounds of Levi getting ready for work in the master bathroom. The normalcy of it felt surreal, given that this was the day that would determine whether I lived or died. Mitchell appeared in the kitchen doorway as I was making coffee, already dressed in the comfortable clothes the hospital had recommended for his procedure. His hair was still messy from sleep, and there were pillow creases on his cheek, but his eyes were alert and calm. How did you sleep? He asked, accepting the mug I offered him. I didn't, really. You? Like a baby. I always sleep well when I know I'm about to do something important. He took a sip of coffee and studied my face. How are you feeling? Nervous? Excited? Terrified? All of the above. I wrapped my hands around my own mug, grateful for the warmth. Mitchell, I keep thinking about what you said yesterday, about Ellen making you promise to take care of me. Do you think she knew this day would come? He was quiet for a moment, considering. Ellen was a nurse for 30 years before she retired. She understood better than most people how illness can isolate you, how families sometimes fall apart under the pressure. He set down his mug and looked directly at me. I think she knew that if you ever needed help, it would probably be because everyone else had let you down. She sounds like she was very wise. She was, and she would have loved watching you fight this battle. Ellen always admired strong women. He smiled softly. She would have been proud of me for keeping my promise. Levi came downstairs at 6:15, moving through the kitchen with the efficient silence of someone avoiding conversation. He poured coffee into a travel mug and grabbed his keys from the counter, barely acknowledging our presence. Good luck today, he said to me without making eye contact. I'll try to stop by the hospital later if I can get away from work. He was gone before either Mitchell or I could respond. leaving behind the lingering scent of his aftershave and the uncomfortable silence of a man fleeing his responsibilities. "Try to stop by," Mitchell repeated quietly. Jesus Christ. "It's fine," I said automatically, though we both knew it wasn't fine at all. He doesn't handle medical stuff well. Never has. Mitchell looked like he wanted to say something harsh about my husband's character, but he held his tongue. Instead, he squeezed my shoulder gently. His loss. He's missing the chance to see his wife be incredibly brave. We arrived at the hospital at 7:30 for our 8 o'clock procedures. Dr. Brennan met us in the pre-op area, looking more excited than I'd ever seen him. I have to tell you both, I barely slept last night thinking about this transplant. The compatibility numbers are so extraordinary that I've already contacted several medical journals about documenting the case. He turned to Mitchell. "Mr. Davidson, your generosity is remarkable. I hope you understand how rare it is for someone to undergo this procedure for a non-family member." "Myrtle is family," Mitchell said simply. "Just not the kind that shares DNA." Dr. Brennan smiled at that. "Well, after today, you'll be sharing something much more intimate than DNA. Your bone marrow will be keeping her alive." They took Mitchell first, wheeling him away with a confidence that made the whole process seem routine. I watched until the elevator doors closed, then spent the next 3 hours in a pre-op room trying to read magazines and pretend I wasn't terrified. Patricia stopped by around 10:30 to check on me. "How are you holding up, sweetie?" "I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong," I admitted. "What if his bone marrow doesn't engraft? What if my body rejects it? What if the surgery is too hard on him?" "Honey, I've been working in oncology for 18 years, and I've seen a lot of bone marrow transplants. The compatibility numbers Dr. Brennan showed me for you and Mitchell are the best I've ever seen. Your body is going to welcome his bone marrow like it's coming home." "How can you be so sure?" Patricia sat down in the chair beside my bed. "Because sometimes when people are meant to help each other, everything just aligns perfectly. Your friend Mitchell showing up exactly when you needed him most, being a perfect match, being willing to undergo surgery for you. That's not coincidence. That's meant to be." At 11:15, Dr. Brennan appeared with news that Mitchell's procedure had gone flawlessly. "We extracted more than enough healthy bone marrow, and he's already awake and asking about you. We'll start your infusion as soon as you're under anesthesia. Can I see him first?" "Briefly, he's in recovery, but he insisted on staying awake until he could talk to you." They wheeled me down the hall to a small recovery room where Mitchell was lying on his side, looking pale but alert. When he saw me, his face broke into a tired smile. "Hey there, how are you feeling?" "I should be asking you that. You're the one who just had surgery." "I'm fine. Sore, but fine." He reached out and took my hand. "Myrtle, I want you to know something. Whatever happens in there, I'm proud of you. You've fought this disease with more courage than anyone should have to have, and regardless of how today goes, you're already a winner." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Mitchell, no, let me finish. I also want you to know that doing this for you has been one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. Thank you for giving me the chance to help. Thank you for being willing to help." He squeezed my hand. "I'll be right here when you wake up, I promise." The next thing I remembered was coming to in a hospital bed with Mitchell sitting beside me, looking considerably more alert than he had in recovery. Afternoon sunlight was streaming through the windows, which meant I'd been unconscious for hours. "Welcome back," he said softly. "How do you feel?" I took inventory. Tired, definitely. Sore in places I couldn't quite identify. But there was something else, something I couldn't name. "Different," I said finally. "I feel different." Dr. Brennan said the infusion went perfectly. Your body started accepting the new bone marrow almost immediately. Mitchell's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Myrtle, you're going to be okay. We did it." Over the next week, Mitchell barely left my side. The hospital had given him a cot in my room since he was recovering from surgery too, and we spent our days reading, talking, and watching terrible daytime television. He helped me walk the halls when I was strong enough, celebrated with me when my blood count started improving, and held my hand during the moments when the uncertainty became overwhelming. Levi visited twice. Both times he stayed less than an hour, making awkward small talk while Mitchell pretended to sleep on his cot. During his second visit, he brought flowers, grocery store carnations that looked like an afterthought. "You look better," he said, standing at the foot of my bed like a visitor in a nursing home. "I feel better. The doctors say the engraftment is going extremely well." "Good. That's good." He glanced at Mitchell, who was reading a book and pointedly not participating in our conversation. "When do you think you'll be coming home?" "Next week, maybe." "Depends on how my blood work looks." "Right. Well, I should let you rest." He leaned down and gave me the kind of perfunctory kiss you'd give a distant relative. "I'll check in tomorrow." But he didn't check in tomorrow or the day after that. By contrast, my phone rang constantly with calls from Mitchell's friends, former teaching colleagues who wanted updates, neighbors who offered to bring meals when we got home, even some of his former students who'd heard about what he was doing and wanted to send their well wishes. "You have wonderful friends," I told him after a particularly sweet call from a woman named Dorothy who'd taught kindergarten with him for 20 years. "They're your friends too now," he said matter-of-factly. "Anyone who cares about me is going to care about you. Is that how it works?" "That's how it works when people actually love you." The comment was casual, but it hit me like a physical blow. Mitchell had said he loved me, present tense, not past tense. Not, "I used to love you," or "I'll always have feelings for you," but "people actually love you," as if it were a simple fact, like saying the sky was blue or water was wet. "Mitchell," I said carefully, "what are we doing here?" He looked up from his book, meeting my gaze directly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what happens when we leave the hospital? You go back to your life 3 hours away? I go back to my house with Levi and we pretend this was just a medical procedure? Is that what you want?" I thought about going home to the empty house, to Levi's continued affair, to children who couldn't be bothered to check if their mother had survived surgery. I thought about eating dinner alone while my husband texted his girlfriend in the next room. "No," I said quietly. "It's not what I want at all." Mitchell set down his book and turned to face me fully. "Myrtle, I'm 64 years old. I'm too old to play games or pretend I feel things I don't feel. I love you. I've loved you since we were 16, and I never completely stopped. These past 2 weeks with you have been the happiest I've been since Ellen died. But I'm married. I'm still sick. I don't even know if I'm going to survive this cancer long term. You're married to a man who's sleeping with someone else while you fight for your life. You're sick, but you're getting better every day. And as for surviving long term," he reached over and took my hand. "Myrtle, none of us know how long we have. Ellen was perfectly healthy when she had her heart attack at 59. Life doesn't come with guarantees, but I'd rather spend whatever time I have left loving you than waste it wishing I'd been braver." I stared at our joined hands, his, still slightly swollen from the surgery he'd undergone to save my life. Mine, finally starting to look less skeletal as my body began to heal. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that when you're ready to leave that house and that marriage, I'll be waiting. Whether that's next week or next year or whenever you're strong enough to make that choice." He lifted my hand and kissed my knuckles gently. "I'm suggesting that maybe it's time for both of us to stop settling for lives that don't make us happy." "I'm scared," I whispered. "Of course you are. Change is terrifying, especially when you've been in survival mode for so long. But Myrtle, what scares me more than change is the idea of you going back to being invisible in your own life." That night, as Mitchell slept on his cot and I lay in my hospital bed feeling his bone marrow rebuilding my blood system cell by cell, I made a decision. Not about leaving Levi or starting over with Mitchell. Those choices could wait until I was stronger. But I decided something simpler and more important. I decided I deserved to be happy. I decided I deserved to be loved by someone who wouldn't abandon me when things got difficult. And I decided that Mitchell Davidson, who had literally given me the gift of life, deserved to know that his love was returned completely. Tomorrow, I would tell him. Tomorrow, I would stop being afraid of what I wanted and start fighting for it as hard as I'd fought the cancer. Tomorrow, I would choose love. 3 months after the transplant, I was declared officially in remission. Dr. Brennan called it the most successful bone marrow transplant outcome he'd seen in his career. But I knew the real reason for my recovery went beyond medical compatibility. For the first time in my adult life, I had someone fighting alongside me instead of against me. Mitchell had extended his stay indefinitely, moving from the guest room to a small apartment across town after I was discharged from the hospital. Officially, he was there to help with my recovery. Unofficially, we both knew he was there because neither of us could bear to be apart again. He came over every morning at 7, arriving with fresh coffee and whatever groceries I needed for the day. We'd sit on my back porch and plan small projects, pruning the overgrown rose bushes, planting herbs for next spring, organizing the closets I'd neglected during treatment. Simple domestic tasks that felt revolutionary because someone actually wanted to do them with me. Levi barely seemed to notice Mitchell's constant presence. If anything, he seemed relieved that someone else was handling the inconvenience of his sick wife's recovery. He came home later and later each night, often reeking of perfume that wasn't mine, and left earlier each morning. We'd become polite strangers sharing a house, which suited both of us perfectly. "You look happy," Patricia commented during one of my follow-up appointments. I mean, genuinely happy, not just healthy. She was right. Despite everything, the ongoing dissolution of my marriage, the lingering uncertainty about my long-term prognosis, the complete indifference of my children, I was happy. Mitchell had reminded me what it felt like to be cherished, to have someone prioritize my well-being above their own convenience. "I am happy," I told her. "For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be." The confrontation I'd been avoiding finally came on a Tuesday evening in January. I was in the kitchen making dinner. Actual dinner, not the soup and crackers I'd subsisted on during treatment. When Levi walked in earlier than usual, his face was flushed, and he had the look of a man who'd been rehearsing a difficult conversation. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. I turned off the stove and faced him. "Okay, I want a divorce." I'd been expecting this for months, but hearing the words still felt like a small punch to the chest. Not because I wanted to stay married to him, but because of the callousness of his timing and delivery. "All right," I said calmly. "When?" He blinked, clearly expecting more of a reaction. "When what? When do you want to start the process? I assume you have a lawyer already lined up." Yes, I've spoken to someone." He shifted uncomfortably. "Myrtle, I want you to know this isn't about your cancer." I almost laughed at that. "Of course it is, Levi. It's entirely about my cancer and how you couldn't handle being married to someone who might need you to take care of them. That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out sharper than I'd intended. "You moved out of our bedroom the day I started chemotherapy. You missed every single treatment appointment. You couldn't even visit me in the hospital without looking like you were being tortured. And now that I'm healthy again, you want to make it official. How exactly is that not about my cancer?" His face reddened. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. Watching you get sicker, not knowing if you were going to die. So your solution was to start sleeping with someone else?" The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Levi's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "Yes, I know about her," I continued. "I saw you together in the hospital parking lot. I know you've been staying at her place most nights. I know you've been planning this exit for months. Myrtle, the only thing I don't understand is why you're bothering to ask for a divorce now. You've already moved on. Just make it legal, and stop pretending this is about anything other than your own selfishness." Levi straightened, finally finding his voice. "Fine. You want to make this ugly? Let's make it ugly. You think I don't know about Mitchell? You think I don't see him here every day, staying until all hours, acting like he owns the place? Mitchell saved my life while you were planning your escape. There's a difference. He's been in love with you since high school. Don't act like his motives were purely charitable." "You're right," I said, surprising him. "Mitchell does love me. He's been nothing but honest about that. The question is, why does that threaten you when you've already found someone else?" Levi stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before, genuine confusion, as if he couldn't understand why I wasn't fighting harder to save our marriage, why I wasn't begging him to reconsider. So that's it? He said finally. 35 years and you're just going to let me walk away? Levi, you walked away months ago. I'm just acknowledging what's already happened. He left that night, taking most of his clothes and his tools from the garage. I watched from the kitchen window as he loaded his truck, feeling nothing but relief that the pretense was finally over. Mitchell arrived the next morning to find me sitting at the kitchen table with divorce papers spread in front of me. "How are you feeling?" he asked, setting down coffee and settling into the chair across from me. "Free," I said, and meant it. Scared, but free. "What are you scared of?" I looked at him, this man who'd given me his bone marrow, his time, his unwavering support, and tried to articulate the fear that had been growing alongside my feelings for him. "I'm scared that I don't know how to be in a healthy relationship. I spent 35 years with someone who made me feel invisible. What if I don't know how to be seen?" Mitchell reached across the table and took my hand. "Myrtle, you've been visible to me since we were 16 years old. You've never been invisible, not to me. But what if this is all just trauma bonding or something? What if when life gets normal and boring, we realize we don't actually work together? Then we'll figure it out together. But Myrtle, I didn't fall in love with you because you had cancer. I fell in love with you 40 years ago because you were brave and kind and funny. The woman I've been spending time with these past few months, the woman who fought cancer with grace, who worried more about my pain from the donation surgery than her own recovery, who's been rebuilding her life from scratch at 62. She's the same person I fell in love with when we were kids, just stronger now. I'm not the same person, though. This whole experience has changed me. Of course it has. Trauma changes everyone, but change isn't always bad, Myrtle. Sometimes it just shows you who you really are underneath all the roles you thought you had to play." That afternoon, Mitchell helped me box up the last of Levi's belongings. As we worked, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd been when I was married, constantly trying to anticipate needs, manage moods, keep everyone happy at the expense of my own well-being. That woman felt like a stranger now. "I think I want to sell the house," I said suddenly as we carried the boxes to the garage. Mitchell stopped walking and looked at me. "Really? There are too many memories here. Too many years of feeling like I didn't belong in my own home." I set down the box I was carrying and looked around the space Levi and I had shared for 2 decades. "I want to start over somewhere new. Somewhere that's just mine." "What kind of place are you thinking about?" "Something smaller, maybe with a better garden. Definitely closer to town so I can walk places." I paused, suddenly nervous about what I was going to say next. "Maybe closer to wherever you decide to live." Mitchell's face broke into the kind of smile I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. "Are you asking me to move in with you, Myrtle Williams?" "I'm asking if you'd want to look for a place together. When I'm ready. When the divorce is final and I've figured out who I am as a single person." I took a deep breath. "I'm asking if you'd be interested in building something new with me, instead of just helping me recover from something old." "I've been waiting 40 years for you to ask me that question." 6 months later, we found a small cottage on the edge of town with mature fruit trees and raised garden beds that someone had built but never planted. It had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that opened onto a screened porch overlooking a creek. "It's perfect," I said the first time we walked through it together. "It needs work," Mitchell pointed out pragmatically. "New roof, updated electrical. The bathroom needs to be completely redone." "So we'll fix it together." "Together," he repeated, as if testing the word. I like the sound of that. We moved in on a Saturday in late summer, exactly 1 year after my bone marrow transplant. Sarah called that morning, the first time she'd initiated contact since before my surgery. "Mom, I heard about the divorce. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I'm happy." "And you're really living with Mitchell now? Dad says you barely knew each other." I looked around our new kitchen, where Mitchell was unpacking dishes and humming an old song I remembered from high school dances. "Your father doesn't know me at all, Sarah. He never did. But Mitchell sees exactly who I am, and he loves me anyway. I just don't want you to make a mistake. You're still recovering from everything that happened. The only mistake I made was waiting so long to choose someone who actually wants to be with me. After I hung up, Mitchell came over and wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said, leaning back against his chest. "Sarah's worried I'm making a mistake. Are you?" I turned in his arms and looked at his face. Older now, marked by the years we'd spent apart, but still the same eyes that had looked at me with love when we were 16. The only mistake would be not trusting that we deserve this happiness. That evening, we sat on our new porch swing watching the sunset paint the creek gold and orange. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, sick, alone, convinced that no one would miss her if she died. That woman felt like someone I'd known long ago, someone I'd outgrown completely. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked Mitchell as lightning bugs began to flicker in the gathering dusk. "Regret what?" "All of it. The surgery, moving here, giving up your quiet retirement to take care of a complicated woman with a messy life." Mitchell was quiet for a moment, considering. "Myrtle, do you know what I regretted most before you called me that night?" I shook my head. "I regretted not fighting harder for you when we were young. I regretted letting you walk away without telling you that I'd love you for the rest of my life whether you chose me or not. I regretted 40 years of wondering what if." He turned to look at me directly. "I don't regret anything that's happened since then. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts because they brought us here." I took his hand, feeling the faint scar on his hip where they'd extracted the bone marrow that saved my life. His cells were still inside me, still rebuilding my blood every day, keeping me alive. We were connected now in a way that went deeper than marriage, deeper than promises. "I love you," I said. "Not because you saved my life, but because you saw something worth saving when no one else could. I love you too. I always have." Well, as we sat there in the gathering darkness, I realized that some stories don't end with revenge or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes they end with quiet victories, with choosing love over resentment, with building something new instead of dwelling on what was broken. I'd lost a marriage that was slowly killing me, children who'd never truly seen me, and a family that had treated me like an obligation. In return, I'd gained a man who loved me completely, a future that felt full of possibility, and most importantly, I'd gained myself. The woman sitting on that porch swing was someone I'd never been before, someone who knew her own worth, someone who refused to settle, someone who understood that love wasn't supposed to feel like work. Mitchell squeezed my hand as the first stars appeared overhead, and I squeezed back, grateful for every choice that had led us to this moment. Grateful for the cancer that had shown me who really mattered. Grateful for the courage to call an old love when I had nowhere else to turn. But mostly, I was grateful for the chance to love and be loved the way I'd always deserved, even when I was too afraid to believe I was worth it. Some endings are beginnings in disguise, and sometimes, the best thing that can happen to you is losing everything you thought you wanted so you can find everything you actually need. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.